We were still stopping at Cerro Lodge and had another full day in the area to enjoy before we would have to make plans for the end of our holiday. We were still keen on finding those bogey birds, Mangrove Hummingbird and lesser ground cuckoo, and thought that we would devote today to that. So we would head first to the Tarcoles mangroves. Well, straight after breakfast, that is. The garden by the dining room had the usual selection of birds and a few new butterfly species, all a nice addition to the full American breakfasts we had ordered. This birding lark gives you an appetite. Green-backed red-eye was a very striking insect and certainly well named with regard to those fabulous red eyes. Tiger longwings are always a charming sight. Time to head out of the lodge gate, where we turned left to head towards the highway. Turning right would severely delay our getting to the mangroves because there were just too many birds to look at. We did stop at the second gate to check on the Pacific screech owls that we'd seen the night before. They were back in residence, presumably after a busy night's hunting, and afforded us a slightly better view and a chance of a few photos in better light than yesterday. We didn't stay long though, as we didn't want to disturb them unduly. Anyway, we had somewhere to be. We didn't stop looking, even though we were heading somewhere specific, and a distant movement resolved into a cinnamon-bellied saltator, the only one we were to see on this trip. It was maybe a little later than ideal when we pitched up at the Tarcoles mangroves, the quieter bit that had been recommended by the birder we had met earlier. First sighting was a banded peacock, nice but not the target. Flycatchers flitting around included yellow olive flatbill, new for the trip, and the old stalwart Panama flycatcher. No hummers though. We headed over to the other mangrove section, on the busier road, coming up with a few new species in that area. We also had another look in the small woodland area for the reported roosting black and white owls. They might have been there, but they were not in their most favored position, and searching the surrounding treetops failed to find them. It was a shame, as it would have been nice to renew our acquaintance with this handsome species. Still, an overhead flock of mixed vulture species also included a couple of magnificent frigate birds. It always confirms that we are somewhere quite exotic when we see these birds. Back in the mangroves, a yellow warbler flitted around. It was obviously being kept interested by the call of the ferruginous pygmy owl. Also nearby was the inevitable Hoffman's woodpecker. We had to check each woodpecker in this area for the very similar red-crowned woodpecker, and indeed we had seen this latter species for the first time in Costa Rica just recently. The red-crowned has no yellow on the nape, unlike the Hoffman's woodpecker, so this one is definitely Hoffman's. Strangely, despite many woodpecker photos being taken, we did not manage to capture an image of red-crowned woodpecker on this trip. Also in this area was another bare-throated tiger heron, clambering rather inelegantly through the mangroves. Out towards Playa Azul, and a common black hawk posing very nicely on a stump, looking quite the lord of all he surveys. Nearby, a white ibis wandered around an enclosure on the edge of the beach. We had exhausted our time at Tarcoles mangroves and had unfortunately missed out on mangrove hummingbird. It was getting warmer as the day progressed, and we decided to cut our losses and try for bogey bird number 2, the lesser ground cuckoo. There was a road we had gone to on our previous visit in 2019, called the Guasamo Road, which was supposedly a site for them, at least according to eBird. We hadn't scored then, but it wouldn't do any harm to try now. If nothing else, The butterflies were a distraction, including fine many-banded daggerwings, an elf, the only queen of the trip, and the beautiful subtly marked barred yellow. Blue-black grassquits, the males a rich glossy black, were pretty common here too. They were fun to watch as they displayed to the females by leaping up from a perch like a mad jack in a box, emitting a loud squeak. These ones, however, seemed to find this just too much effort. Maybe it had got a little too hot for something so energetic. At least they were still squeaking. One thing we were not seeing, or hearing even, was the lesser ground cuckoo. It was beginning to feel like the species was a figment of someone's imagination. A distant tree seemed to be full of little birds, a mixture of yellow-crowned euphonias and scrub euphonias. It was something, but it was a shame that they would not come any closer. We turned again to the butterflies, seeing our first of the quite spectacular tailed oranges. The open wings were harder to see but very worth the wait. Simple patch might seem a little dull in comparison with the other butterfly species, but they have a subtle charm of their own. Those white spots and the red legs are well set off by the dusky brown wings. Ferruginous pygmy owl is maybe the easiest of the owl species to see, and especially to hear in the daytime, but it is still exciting to see a bird this well. And of course, the constant piping call of the owl entices other species in, intent on checking out the owl's position and maybe chasing it away, so it was not a surprise to come across this black-headed trogon close by. Sadly, the owl call did not entice in any lesser ground cuckoos either. We left again, this time heading to Tvives where there were mangroves and pools to explore. Maybe even another chance of the mangrove hummer. No hummer was seen, although a great egret, a green heron and a great kiskadee all got themselves onto the day list. More butterflies in this area included common spurwing and a lone Florida white. We were heading towards the coast at Bajamar and its beautiful, deserted volcanic sand beaches. A power line here held a tropical mockingbird. Not an uncommon species on our bird lists, we had previously seen birds in Isla Margarita, Belize, Mexico, and Panama, but very few in Costa Rica, where it is considered a naturalized exotic species by eBird. In fact, A single bird on our 2019 trip and one near the airport on our arrival this time was the entirety of our Costa Rica list so far. It was nice therefore to get a photo and some video of this Costa Rican rarity. A cuckoo, at last. Not the longed-for lesser ground cuckoo unfortunately, but a squirrel cuckoo in a small bush at the side of the road. A welcome sighting at any time though. This handsome bird gets its name from the way it clambers through the vegetation just like a real squirrel. Back to the lodge in the late afternoon as the weather seemed to be closing in. We stopped to take another look at the Pacific screech owls as they seemed to be waking for the evening. They were just fantastic to watch, but we were careful to avoid getting too close. Both cameras have big zoom lenses. When we entered the lodge grounds we heard, and then saw, a troop of mantled howler monkeys moving through the trees near the reception and dining room. They seemed to have found a fruiting cecropia tree and were enjoying the bounty. It was particularly amusing to watch a wide-eyed youngster watching Mum as she snaffled the fruits. That baby was particularly cute. Amongst the monkeys was the odd yellow-naped Amazon or rufous-backed wren, but it wasn't too long before we had to retreat to shelter as the heavens opened. This wasn't our first rainstorm of the holiday, but it was by far the most spectacular. The hammering rain was accompanied by rolling thunder and sheet and forked lightning. We couldn't complain, our rainy season trip hadn't been very disturbed by rain, so far, and this downpour had had the good manners to wait until evening before starting. At least the storm solved the dilemma of whether to head out somewhere else to eat. No, we would stick with the lodge and its pizza restaurant, a mere minute's walk in a rain poncho away from our room. It wasn't too much of a disappointment. They did do exceedingly good pizza. It was our last night at Cerro Lodge, so we had to pack and to decide where to go next. We thought it would be better to head back up towards Liberia, so that we would be handier for the airport on our last morning. The wonders of the internet allowed us to book a 2-night stay in a spot in the foothills about an hour's drive inland from the airport. After a good night's sleep, we were awoken by the rather eerie calls of mantled howler monkeys very close by. It seemed that the troop from yesterday were back to breakfast on the same cecropia tree, and they certainly deserved another looking at. There was more than one mother with a youngster amongst the animals, and it was fascinating to watch Mum negotiate her way around the tree branches with Junior clinging tightly to the fur of her belly. Variegated squirrels also seemed to find the cecropia tree attractive and were unbothered by the presence of the mantled howlers. At breakfast, the scarlet macaws came in to feed. We had assumed that these two birds were a mated pair as this species mates for life, but later we observed one of the birds apparently feeding the other. Chicks stay with their parents for up to 2 years after hatching, so this might indeed be a well-grown chick. If so, what had happened to the other parent, who should really have been present too? We had decided to spend the morning driving the Cerro Lodge access road down to the river once more. The birding down there was second to none, and we did not need to be at our new accommodation until late afternoon. Everything packed, we headed out of the lodge gate for the last time on this trip and turned right. Almost the first sighting was a trogon. Not the black-headed trogon we had been seeing quite commonly, but a gartered trogon. The yellow eye ring and stripy undertail coverts clearly identify this species. Variable seed-eaters inhabited the hedgerows whilst a couple of northern jacanas wandered around a small trackside pond. It was peaceful, easy birding and very enjoyable. Up popped a streak-headed woodcreeper exploring a nearby tree. That plumbeous kite was found perched on the same tree we'd found him on last time we'd driven down the road, but the post that had a red-breasted meadowlark last time boasted an eastern meadowlark now. Interestingly, it was still a meadowlark though. A southern lapwing hunkered down in the grasses, but the real stars of the drive were the double-striped thick-knees. We had first seen this species back in 2005 and not again until a single bird running down the road in the dark, a couple of nights back, so it was delightful to come across several birds wandering the fields and the areas where the cattle came to be watered. We took the opportunity to photograph a smart-looking groove-billed Annie. Down by the river's edge, the birds we'd noticed last time were not present today. Perhaps a much bigger American crocodile on the far bank was putting them off a bit. A mangrove swallow did deign to peer out from a spot in a hollow metal pipe. Heading back up the track, our attention was taken by a load of butterflies feeding on a fallen fruit. Most were Hermes satyrs, new for the trip, whilst the odd, larger, northern tropical buckeye also got in on the action. A black-bellied whistling duck that hadn't been present earlier showed well as we returned up the track towards the lodge. Passing the lodge and continuing towards the highway, we stopped to take a look at a stripe-headed sparrow. They might be quite common, but they are very handsome birds. So, that was the end of our time at Cerro Lodge. We might not have found mangrove hummingbird or lesser ground cuckoo, But we had seen lots of good birds, insects, and animals, and we felt this fully vindicated our decision to abandon the all-inclusive resort at Tamarindo and strike out for ourselves. Now we had 2 nights at the Hacienda en Los Volcanes in the foothills of the Miravales volcano in Guanacaste. A quite different habitat, so we might expect a few different species. We would see. For more information on our trip, see our travelogue available from Amazon. Parts 1 and 2 of this video series are on our YouTube channel. We have made 3 previous trips to Costa Rica, and these are documented in this travelogue and in videos on our YouTube channel. The last part of our video series for the Impromptu tour, covering our time spent in the foothills of the Miravales volcano, is coming soon. We hope you enjoyed this video. If so, don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel so that you don't miss any of our new or older content. Lots of birding and wildlife videos are on there from all over the world. Thanks for watching.